The Ritz-Carlton Hotel sparkled like a diamond in the night. The Monteverde Educational Fund's Gala transformed the rooftop into a magical garden. Silk tablecloths, shimmering candles, and the gentle melody of a piano floated above the dazzling New York skyline. It was the event of the year, a meeting place for business tycoons, famous artists, and influential media moguls. And my first public appearance after a long seclusion. I didn't come for the glitz and glamour. I had a personal goal, and I wasn't alone. 4 young men, tall and statuesque, accompanied me. Each of them exuded confidence, but they moved in sync, like a single team. Our appearance did not go unnoticed. Eyes were drawn to us, not only because of our looks, but also because of the invisible energy that bound us together. I felt the burning stares, but one of them pierced me through, stopping my heart for a moment. I turned around, and the world around me faded. It was him, Ethan Caldwell, the man who once meant everything to me, the one who swore to be there forever, until he found out I couldn't have children. The day he turned away from us, every step echoed like a crack in my soul. 17 years, an eternity since Ethan disappeared from my life. Now he stood there, in the crowd, impeccable in his tuxedo. Gray hair touched his slicked-back hair, and his gaze remained as piercing as ever. But today there was something new in his eyes. Confusion. He looked at me, then at my children, and the confusion turned to panic. He saw what was impossible to deny. In every face, in every feature, there was his reflection. Owen's pale gray eyes, Chloe's chiseled cheekbones, Liam's strong chin, Ava's sly half-smile, all things he couldn't explain. After all, he left, confident that I could never be a mother. I gently squeezed Ava's hand as she turned to me, biting her lip. "Is that him?" "Mom." I nodded, not taking my eyes off Ethan. "Do you think he'll run?" Liam asked quietly, his voice laced with irony mixed with anxiety. "He won't run," I replied, my voice calmer than I expected. "A man like that won't run. He'd rather face danger head-on because he craves answers more than anyone here." Ethan moved towards me, his gaze locked on. He desperately tried to maintain a mask of composure, but I saw a telltale tremor in the hand holding his wineglass. Only I could notice this fleeting sign of confusion. Stopping a few steps away, he scanned the faces of my companions, as if fighting a storm raging inside. Then his voice rang out, rough, almost alien. "Olivia Sterling." I met his gaze, not coldly, not warmly, but with the calm that comes to a person who has experienced all shades of heartache. "I thought you couldn't." My chin lifted proudly. "This is Owen, Chloe, Liam, and Ava." Each name sounded like a death knell, shattering the walls of faith that he had carefully built over the years. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. And I knew that Ethan Caldwell, the man who once left in search of a better life, was now faced with a reality he could never have imagined. And he didn't even know half the truth. Ethan froze, as if roots had suddenly grown through his shoes into the paved terrace. The gaze of his darting eyes returned to the children again and again, vainly trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. But the resemblance, undeniable and cruel, cut deeper with each passing second, and I knew that words could no longer hide the truth. Are they yours?" he croaked, as if a lump was stuck in his throat. I hesitated to answer, savoring the moment. Let him fully feel what he had so fiercely denied, what he had run away from without looking back for almost 2 decades. "Yes," I replied, not taking my eyes off his bewildered face. "They are my children." Ethan recoiled as if struck. He looked at Owen, a confident young man with dark hair and those those unmistakable gray eyes, exactly like Ethan's in his youth. Then he turned his gaze to Chloe, with her deep eyes and perfectly shaped eyebrows, my reflection, but with his undeniable presence. Liam and Ava stood still, their eyes fixed on the trembling figure in front of them. But Olivia Sterling, you said you couldn't. The doctors said. I cut him off with a quiet but firm voice. We thought so. A silence hung, ringing and heavy. I saw Ethan bite his lip, clenching the glass in his hand until his knuckles turned white, as if it were the only anchor keeping him in reality. Whose children are they? The question escaped his lips like a cry from the soul, imbued not with doubt, but with chilling horror. I smiled almost imperceptibly, not mockingly, but with the bitterness that had accumulated in my heart for years. Ethan, I said distinctly, as if hammering out each word, they are ours, mine and yours. It was as if he had been torn from the flow of reality. The world around him froze, all sounds ceased, and in his eyes I saw darkness gathering. No, this can't be, he whispered, stepping back as if from a ghost. This is unthinkable. Owen took a step forward, shoving his hands into his trouser pockets. There was no warmth or sympathy in his gaze, only a searing coldness. Believe it or not, it's your choice, but the truth doesn't need your permission to exist. Ethan opened his mouth as if to say something, but the words caught in his throat. I could see fragments of thoughts flashing through his mind like a frantic kaleidoscope as he tried to reconstruct his reality and accommodate the impossible. The man whose will once shaped the destinies of an entire empire now stood as if paralyzed before four familiar strangers. I slowly exhaled, trying to quell the trembling. If you want to know the truth, I'll tell you, but not here, not for the amusement of these curious onlookers, eager to see us crumble. Ethan nodded as if in a dream, his gaze fixed on the children. I need time. Liam let out a laugh that held no joy, only bitter irony. How generous of us to have given you 17 years to prepare. I turned to the children. Let's go, I said, my voice leaving no room for hesitation. Without wasting a second, I led them away, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the ballroom, as if lost in a labyrinth of his own thoughts. I felt his gaze fixed on our backs, heavy with a mixture of regret and fear. As the elevator doors closed, Ava whispered, her eyes filled with worry. Mom, are you going to tell him the truth? I looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall. There was a woman whose face was no longer distorted by tears and the pain of betrayal. A mother of 4, the keeper of an incredible secret. Yes, I replied, looking firmly at my reflection, but I will tell this story the way I see fit, and only if he proves brave enough to hear it all the way through. The story is far from over, but one thing I know for sure, we don't have to hide our eyes anymore, and certainly not me. That night, Ethan Caldwell didn't sleep a wink. He left the gala as if in a trance, haunted by the ghosts of 4 young strangers. Each of their faces, each expression seemed to pierce the armor he had so carefully built around himself over the years. Each step toward the penthouse was difficult for Ethan, as if he were carrying a burden of memories. Every wall screamed of a past life he had once fled. The next morning, Ethan dialed the number of Carter Hayes, his personal assistant, taciturn, insightful, and fanatically loyal. Carter Hayes, I need you to turn everything inside out regarding Olivia Sterling. Ethan's voice was quiet, but there was tension in it. Especially after 2007, medical records, financial reports, legal documents, anything you can find. Carter asked no questions. He simply replied, "It will be done, sir. I'll get started immediately." All day, Ethan barely left his desk, drowning in old records, notes, and scraps of memories of Olivia Sterling. In the bottom drawer, the one he could never bring himself to throw away, lay their wedding photograph. Near midnight, the phone rang. "Sir," Carter said clearly, "I've discovered something quite specific." Ethan straightened up in his chair, as if he had been electrocuted. "Speak." Olivia Sterling became a participant in a reproductive research program in late 2007, an experimental project called Novogenesis, led by Dr. Bennett Shaw. She was involved in that top-secret fertility restoration program, the one that used stem cells and egg reactivation, Ethan blurted out, feeling his heart pounding wildly in his chest. Carter Hayes slowly said, "Not just involved, she was one of the first two to have the treatment succeed." Ethan was speechless. After a long pause, he squeezed out, "What about the children? Are there birth records, medical histories?" "I hacked into encrypted medical files," Carter Hayes replied quietly. "All four, Owen, Chloe, Liam, and Ava, were born at Mount Sinai Hospital within 2 years of her treatment. Each has DNA records." Hayes paused as if giving Ethan time to catch his breath. Ethan froze, afraid to move. "They are all your biological children, sir. The DNA match is 99.97%. The world around Ethan seemed to freeze. He lowered the phone to the desk, unable to take his eyes off the screen. There, on the display, were the profiles of all four children, name, date of birth, blood type, and that line that could not be disputed. Ethan Caldwell. Carter Hayes was still saying something into the phone, but Ethan could no longer hear a word. An icy emptiness engulfed him, not from being deceived, but from the realization he himself had slammed that door shut 17 years ago, and now, pathetic, he stood outside, timidly hoping that it would open again. For hours he sat in silence, staring at the ultrasound image attached to the chart of Chloe, his eldest daughter. This should have been the moment when he was there. The first snapshot he should have greeted with elation, not soul-crushing regret. As dawn approached, with the first rays of sunlight kissing the horizon, Ethan, steeling himself, called Carter Hayes back and uttered a single phrase, ringing with determined resolve. "I need an immediate meeting with Dr. Bennett Shaw." The truth, like a powerful underground current, was bursting forth, and this time Ethan knew there was nowhere left to run, nor did he have the right. Across town, I, Olivia Sterling, was still unaware of what Ethan had discovered. But seeing his gaze last night, I knew one thing: he wouldn't back down. And perhaps it was time for me to tell this story from beginning to end, in my own words. Every tiny detail, every decision, every incredible twist of fate intertwined to give the world these 4 lives. And that's why I didn't seek Ethan out. Not out of hatred. No, I was simply waiting for him to want to come back himself, not for the sake of the title, but for the sake of the truth. 3 days after that memorable gala, on a quiet, almost frozen day, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was. I didn't even need to peek through the peephole. The very atmosphere around me seemed to still as I flung the door open. Ethan stood there, not in an impeccable tuxedo, but in a simple gray shirt with rolled-up sleeves, his tie carelessly stuffed into his jacket pocket. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept a wink since that night our paths crossed again. I remained silent, simply stepping aside, inviting him in. This house had become my refuge, a fortress where my children grew. Now Ethan was entering a world he had left long before they were born. The first to break the silence was Ava. She was just coming out of the kitchen with a cup, from which a light steam was rising. Seeing Ethan, she slowed her pace. Her eyes studied him cautiously, as if he were a foreign element in a familiar landscape. Her gaze held distrust mixed with curiosity. "Hello," Ava said, her voice devoid of both warmth and coldness. Ethan merely inclined his head in response. "Hello." I stepped into the living room, leaving the door ajar. Soon all four of them gathered there: Owen, Chloe, Liam, and Ava. They settled on the sofa, turning their gazes towards the man they had never known, but had always asked about. Ethan froze in the middle of the room. No one offered him a seat, and I remained silent. He took a deep breath and began. "I understand that I have no right, but I can no longer live without facing this. I need to know, and I need to be heard." Liam crossed his arms over his chest, his gaze piercing and full of reproach. "Heard for what? To make you feel better knowing that you disappeared before we were even born?" Ethan swallowed hard, as if a lump was stuck in his throat. "You didn't know," Olivia Sterling once told me. Owen interrupted him, his voice calm but with an underlying weight. "You didn't know about us, but you knew Mom. You knew what kind of person she was. Did it never occur to you that if she decided to become a mother, nothing could stop her?" Ethan was silent, his head bowed. I noticed the confusion in his eyes, an emotion I had never seen in him back when he left almost 20 years ago. Chloe tilted her head slightly, her gaze completely unreadable, as if she were trying to solve a complex puzzle. The question rang out deafeningly, like a thunderclap in a quiet room. "If you had known then, if you had known that you and Mom could have had children, would you have stayed?" Silence hung in the air, thick and tense. Ethan was silent, as if gathering his courage. He walked over to the window, stared out at the street for a long time, as if searching for an answer there, then slowly turned around. "I want to say yes. I want to say that I would have stayed, that I would have fought for it." His voice filled with regret, mixed with bitterness. He faltered as if stumbling over his own words. "But who was I back then? I don't even recognize myself. I was scared, terrified of a life I didn't choose, and honestly, I just ran." Ava slammed her cup down on the table, and the sound echoed through the room. "And what do you choose now?" Her gaze held a challenge. Ethan surveyed his children, slowly, carefully, as if trying to forever imprint their faces in his memory. "Now, I choose not to run. I choose to take responsibility for my actions, even if you never forgive me. I will never disappear again." Owen stood up and approached him. Two men, father and son, stood face to face. In Owen's eyes, there was a mixture of anger and hope. "Your appearance won't change the past, but you can decide what our present will be." I watched my children, each of them. I raised them to be strong and independent, so that they would know their worth, without needing a father. And now they stand before him, not pushing him away, but trying to understand, asking questions, seeking answers. In their eyes, a faint hope for redemption. I stepped forward, maintaining an outward calm, but with determination in my voice, I said, "If you came here hoping for immediate forgiveness and acceptance, I can't promise that. But if you're willing to take responsibility for the past, this door is open to you." Ethan nodded, and for the first time, I saw something more in his eyes than cold ambition or iron control. A timid desire to try again, to give himself another chance, flickered within them. Liam shrugged, trying to hide his emotion. "We don't need a father, but sometimes it's nice to have someone around who's willing to just listen." A faint, sad smile appeared on Ethan's face, rare for him, full of regret, but sincere. He came back that Sunday afternoon without warning. In his hands, he held a folder of documents and a box of waffle cookies from the bakery I once adored, the one that closed almost 8 years ago. He remembered, or at least he tried to remember. I opened the door and saw him standing on the doorstep, a little awkward, but without a trace of his former timidity. There was no more wariness in his eyes. They were full of expectation, as if asking for permission, a sign, or at least a tiny spark of hope. "I don't expect anything in return," Ethan said quietly, placing the box of cookies on the floor. "I know the past can't be undone, but I want to get to know them. Truly." There was sincerity in his voice, and it touched me deeply. I sat down opposite him, leaving a palpable gap between us. "I won't stop you, but remember, it's all up to them now." He just nodded silently, as if accepting the inevitable. At that moment, the silence was broken by the patter of little feet echoing down the stairs. The children returned from the movies, bursting into the room like rays of sunshine, playing in their hair and on their shoulders. Ava was the first to notice Ethan, and surprise flashed across her face. Behind her, as if on cue, came Chloe, Owen, and Liam, each with their own unique reaction, from wary suspicion to timid curiosity. Ethan stood up, clenching his hands nervously, trying to suppress a treacherous tremor. "I know I don't deserve this," he began, stumbling over his words, "but I ask for only one thing. Allow me a chance to get to know you if you want to." Liam raised an eyebrow skeptically and, unable to hide the sarcasm in his voice, drawled, "Get to know us how? Weekend picnics, Sunday family dinners, greeting cards for every holiday for the next 17 years? Ethan didn't make excuses. "None of that, if that's not what you want. I'll just be there when you need me. Or if you just want to talk." Owen took a step forward, piercing him with his gaze. "Are you sure about that?" Ethan nodded firmly. "I don't know where to start, but I'll be here, even if you just need someone to listen." A ringing silence filled the room, as if time had stopped, cutting us off from the rest of the world. All that could be heard was even breathing, and the oppressive weight of choice. Ava turned to me, her eyes questioning. "Well, Mom?" I shook my head gently, smiling sadly. "My path is already walked. Now it's all in your hands." Chloe decisively threw her bag onto the sofa and, looking at Ethan, asked, "Do you have a car?" Ethan blinked as if waking up. "Yes, of course." "Then will you take us to that ice cream shop on the corner of 5th Avenue and Central Park South? It's open until 8. Let's start small." For the first time that day, a smile flickered across Ethan's face, not wide, but sincere, touching. Liam sighed dramatically. "I'll go too. Not for him, of course. It's just that they really have amazing ice cream there." Owen turned to me, hope in his eyes. "Are you coming with us?" I shook my head and smiled warmly. "Not today, guys. Go have fun." When the door closed behind them, I sank into the armchair by the window. The sunset spread across the rooftops like a bronze blanket, woven from the last rays of the sun. I didn't expect a miracle, didn't dream of magic, but even the smallest, most tentative steps are still steps, and they need to be taken. That night, the children returned silent, as if keeping a secret. Just a few words about a new flavor of ice cream, a funny incident where Ethan mixed up the order, and his absent-mindedness when he forgot his car keys on the counter. These small, awkward, but so vivid details were the surest signs of change. A second chance, even if belated, remains a chance. And this time, I certainly won't stand in his way. Ethan started visiting regularly, but always tactfully, without demanding attention. He quietly texted each of them, without unnecessary drama, short and to the point. "If you're free, I'm at the bookstore near campus. I came across some interesting books or found a great sandwich place near the dorms, saving it for you if you want. At first, the children were silent, but gradually each of them began to respond in their own way. Owen was the first, the most reserved, but curiosity got the better of him. One day after lectures, he simply walked into the cafe where Ethan was waiting. Without greetings or handshakes, he simply pulled up a chair and blurted out, "I have half an hour. If you have questions, ask." Ethan didn't ask questions. Instead, he launched into an utterly implausible story about losing his wallet in college and, in order to survive, being forced to photocopy other people's IDs. The absurdity of the situation was so great that Owen couldn't help but burst out laughing. This rare, unexpected laughter seemed to break a hole in the wall between them, marking the beginning of their first truly open conversation. Chloe was different. She remained aloof, always leaning slightly towards the door, as if ready to bolt at any second. But the moment Ethan casually mentioned a local art exhibition, her eyes lit up with genuine passion. By their second meeting, she had brought her sketchbook. They talked for almost 2 hours. Not once did the word father escape her lips. Liam, perceptive, cautious, and never known for his easygoing nature, peppered Ethan with sharp, probing questions. "Why now? What if we don't want you in our lives?" Ethan never had ready-made, perfect answers, but each time he looked him straight in the eye and said firmly, "I don't have the right answers, but I won't disappear again." And gradually, Liam stopped flinching when Ethan spoke his name. Ava was the last to open up, but when she finally did, the change in her was dramatic, faster than anyone else. One bleak, rainy day, she sent Ethan a short message. "Bus broke down. Are you busy?" He appeared as if from nowhere, just 12 minutes later, with his coat billowing in the wind and a tiny umbrella in his hand. She hardly said a word the whole ride, but as she got out of the car, she left a crumpled note in the glove compartment. "Thanks for coming." I watched all of this from afar, like a shadow, not interfering, not giving advice, simply silently observing as events unfolded, like a mother standing on the bank of a rushing river, watching her children choose their own, sometimes rickety, bridges to cross to the other side. One evening, late at night, when all four had returned home, I found them around the kitchen table, engrossed in casual conversation. Owen was enthusiastically recounting the art exhibition he had visited with Chloe and Ethan. Liam was teasing Ava for calling him Meteorologist of the Year, mimicking an important weatherman. Chloe smiled quietly, watching Liam impersonate Ethan's bewildered voice when he managed to get lost in the woods. I didn't join their lively conversation. I stopped in the doorway, cupping a warm mug of tea in my hands, and felt something real, something important, slowly but surely growing between these people who had once been complete strangers. The phone vibrated in my hand, interrupting my ascent up the stairs. A message from Ethan flashed on the screen. "Thanks for not slamming all the doors shut." I froze, staring at the words, but the response wouldn't come. Not out of anger. No, rather, I wasn't ready to give thanks. Deep inside, one agonizing question still gnawed at me. Was the true reason for his departure simply my inability to have children? Or was there something else, something he never dared to reveal? I remember one early autumn evening when the air was already cool and the sidewalks were covered in golden fallen leaves. Ava walked into the kitchen. Her question was like a quiet explosion, stopping time. "Do you ever regret it?" She blurted out softly, almost like a sigh, but spoken by Ava, our youngest, most tender and sensitive of all. It carried a weight that we had all been afraid to touch until that moment. Ethan was slicing apples. His hand froze midair. The knife blade tapped softly against the wooden board, and silence fell. He looked up, meeting Ava's gaze. A shadow flickered in his eyes, revealing all the pain of the unspoken. Eyes in which the reflection of young Olivia Sterling was splashing looked clearly but piercingly, as if piercing any obstacles with a glance. Silence reigned. Owen, Chloe, and Liam stared intently at Ethan, as if waiting for the same answer from him. Ethan slowly put down the knife, carefully wiped his hands with a kitchen towel, and pulling up a chair, sat down opposite Ava. He didn't dodge, no sighs, just a long, drawn-out silence before he spoke. His voice was quiet, hoarse, exposing all the harshness of the truth. "Yes," he breathed. Ava tilted her head slightly, impatience in her gaze. "What do you regret?" Ethan looked at each face around the table. Memories flashed in his eyes, memories that had never been in his life, but which now seemed painfully real. "I regret that I didn't have the courage to stay," he said, and there was bitterness in his voice, "that I let fear conquer love. He ran instead of fighting. And most of all, I regret missing every—" Ethan continued, his voice now firm, as if he were chiseling each word from stone. No one interrupted. No excuses, no attempts to soften the blow. "I used to think I needed the perfect family, the kind everyone expects. Ultimately, all I needed was you all sitting here. I realized that, albeit too late," Ethan's voice faltered. Liam still had his arms crossed, but a flicker of warmth crossed his gaze. Chloe propped her cheek on her hand, and the skepticism had vanished from her face. Owen gave a barely perceptible nod of agreement. Only Ava continued to stare at him. "And what do you want now?" she asked in an icy tone. "Just one thing," Ethan replied, looking directly into her eyes. "A chance to not miss anything anymore, if you'll let me." Silence hung in the room. Not a heavy silence, but one full of contemplation. A silence in which hearts weighed old grievances and a timid hope for the future. Later, when the children had retreated to their rooms, I found Ethan in the kitchen. He sat by the window, watching the autumn wind tear leaves from the trees. "I heard everything," I said, pulling a chair to the table. He looked up at me. There was no wariness in his eyes, no expectation of praise or forgiveness, only quiet hope. "They've changed," I continued, "but not because you tried to do something extraordinary, but because you were honest with them." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's the only thing I have left," he whispered, glancing away at the leaves dancing in the wind. There was weariness in his voice, but also a glimmer of hope. I watched him in silence, and this time a single look was enough. He nodded understandingly, his eyes never leaving mine. "And you?" The question hung in the air, like an inevitability. I knew he would ask, but I had no answer. Not because I hadn't forgiven him. No, forgiveness had come long ago. It's just that some wounds, once healed, leave scars that no longer hurt, but serve as a reminder. "I need to ask you something," I said quietly, "but not today." Ethan understood. There was humility and respect in his eyes. He didn't press the issue. When he left, I stood on the porch for a long time, watching his silhouette disappear into the soft glow of the streetlights. Two feelings warred within me: relief and apprehension. Sincerity is only the beginning of the road. Earning trust takes much more, and I knew the real test was yet to come. Ethan became a frequent visitor to our home, but always kept his distance. He never stayed late, never disrupted the children's routine, and never asked for anything in return. Sometimes he helped Ava with her science presentation, took Chloe to a local photography exhibition, or played chess with Owen until midnight, letting him feel a little more grown up. With Liam, there was still that push and pull. but at least he no longer ran away when Ethan appeared at the door. And I tried not to interfere, watching the fragile intertwining of their relationships like a seedling pushing through asphalt. I just stood and watched. I watched Ethan, his patient, unhurried efforts, as if he were carefully mending the frayed fabric of our lives. I saw how he looked at the children, with tenderness, with what trepidation he entered each moment, as if he had found a long-lost treasure. And I watched myself, the woman who once hated him with such ferocity that she wanted to erase his name from her memory, and now felt her heart softening treacherously. One evening, after sending the children upstairs, I made 2 cups of tea and went out to the back porch. From here, you could see the shimmering city lights in the distance, and the autumn wind whispered something to the old maples. Ethan stood, leaning slightly against the railing, quietly looking into the distance. I handed him a cup, and for a while, we were silent. "This view," he said quietly, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. "You dreamed of sitting here every night, with the children, with a husband, and a cat named Whiskers." I couldn't help but laugh. "I can't stand cats." "I know," Ethan smiled. A shadow of sadness crossed his eyes. "But you still said it. It gave me strength. Back then, you seemed like an integral part of my life." Ethan turned, and in the dim light, I saw candlelight dancing in his eyes. "I don't want to dredge up the past," he said quietly, with a kind of doomed tenderness. "I know I messed everything up myself, but if I had the chance, I'd like to help you create something new. Not a copy of what was, not a perfect picture, but something completely different. Ours." I gripped my mug tighter, feeling the warmth spread through my palms. But inside me, an icy wind of doubt raged, tormented by an unspoken question. Looking up, I met his eyes. "Ethan, tell me, when you left, was it only about the kids?" He froze as if struck by lightning. The wind howled outside the window as if nature itself were holding its breath, awaiting his answer. "No," he whispered, looking down. There was undisguised pain in his voice. "That was the easiest explanation. But the truth is, I was scared." He paused, gathering his strength. "I looked into the future and realized I wasn't good enough for you. You were so strong, so confident, and I turned out to be weaker than I ever imagined." His words resonated within me, not with sharp pain, but with a strange sense of completion, as if the last missing piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. "I remember thinking then," I whispered, my voice trembling, "if you had just said that then, we would have found a way to each other. But you chose silence and disappeared." My voice trembled with suppressed resentment. "I know," Ethan whispered, and there was such deep sadness in his voice that it touched my heart. "And I will regret it for the rest of my days." A heavy silence hung between us. I raised my head, gazing at the city spread out below. The lights twinkled like distant fleeting stars. "We can't go back, Ethan," I said slowly, each word a struggle. "Too much is broken. I'm no longer the naive girl who once wrote Whiskers in her diary." Ethan laughed softly, his laughter tinged with sadness, but he didn't interrupt me. "But," I continued, steeling myself, "if you really want to stay, or for the sake of the children, for yourself, and if you're willing to accept this new imperfect beginning of ours." I turned to him, searching his eyes for an answer. There was longing in them, but not a hint of pressure. "Then maybe we can become something else." Ethan was silent. He simply nodded, looking down. And for the first time in almost 20 years, we stood side by side, and there was no chasm full of pain and resentment between us. Olivia Sterling's story is a reminder that sometimes the deepest wounds become the foundation for the most lasting healing. The past may be filled with bitter memories and misunderstandings, but honesty, patience, and a willingness to take responsibility can open the door to a new life. Not the one that was before, but to something more real, more genuine. In life, it is impossible to turn back time and undo what has been done. But we always have a choice: how to face tomorrow with our heads held high and grace in our souls.